When I got to the top, I said, hey, man, I'm not too far. Okay.
All that information up on my blog, as well as a link to an awesome freebie. You can find me on Twitter at LovelyGeek, as well as Instagram at The Lovely Geek. So to kind of get us started, I want to ask you all, raise your hand. How many of you remember the very first time you logged into WordPress? And possibly, delete an API key or get themselves into trouble. And then what you can do is you assign your clients to this role once you start creating those users. And it's an easy way to determine what they can and can't do. To piggyback off that, the next plugin I use is called Minimize. And this allows you to hide sections of the admin based on user role. So then what I do with this plugin is I go through, they have a list of all the different things that you can restrict access to. I mean, it breaks everything out. And so then I'll start restricting access to certain areas of the admin for the client role. I usually hide things like access to the theme, settings, anything that a client can accidentally mess up. And again, it's all about streamlining things and giving them the information that they need. I'll also use this to hide dashboard widgets. I also like to do this, again, after all the functionality has been implemented, so that way I can hide certain parts of plugins that they don't need access to. So after I've created my users and I've hit everything and optimized it, I use another plugin called user switching. And this allows you to quickly switch back and forth between users, and that way you can test their logins without having to log out and log back in, and just make sure that everything is working as it should. This is also a great plugin to keep installed long-term down the road. If a client ever comes to you and says, hey, I'm having trouble with X, Y, and Z, or I can't see something, and they've changed their password, this just lets you get in. You can quickly switch to them and see what they're talking about. So next I'm going to talk about streamlining the dashboard widgets. So as I mentioned with the Minimize plugin, one of the first things that I do is I hide some of the unnecessary dashboard widgets. I don't know about you, but I've never used any of the default widgets that have come installed with WordPress. So I usually hide all of those because if I'm not using them and I consider myself a power user, chances are a client's not going to find them very useful. So I'll hide like the added plans, the quick draft, and so forth. Sometimes I'll hide certain like plugin related widgets that I don't think that the client is going to find beneficial. Like I find the Yoast SEO one not to be very useful for a client. And you can do this through code by hiding the dashboard widgets, but I do prefer using the Minimize plugin because that way if you ever have to unhide something, you know where everything is. So after I've hidden all the default stuff, then I start bringing in a few of my own. So one of the things that I really like to do for every project that I touch is create a custom dashboard widget. And I'll include things like theme notes, image sizes, I'll create documentation, which I'll get to a little bit more in detail later on, and any resources, notes, anything that I think might be useful for the client. And you do this through code. If you have a theme that you use for every build, you can build this into your own theme and just tailor it every time you create a new site. And again, it's one of those things that when a client comes in to the admin and sees that you've created this experience just for them, it's going to go so far. Not to mention, they're just going to feel a little bit more relief because they know that, okay, I have a general place to go to see, some information. Then the next thing I do is I install another plugin called Google Analytics Dashboard for WordPress. This is really helpful because clients love to see stats. They want to see how their website is doing. Again, they're investing time and money into this project. They want to make sure that they're getting what they paid for. And having a dashboard widget that easily lets them see their stats goes so far. Google Analytics, if you're not using it on a regular basis, can be intimidating as well. Plus, it's one more place that a client would have to go to see statistics. But by bringing in a dashboard widget, they're able to see all this information all in one spot. And it also puts the tracking code in automatically, so it's one less thing you have to do in your steps to launch. Then I have a couple optional plugins that I use depending upon how the site is set up. If we have a front-end search bar, I like to install the Search Meter plugin because that'll allow you to see what your users are searching for. And it's really good for content strategy. So if you want to see, okay, what is a user searching for, what posts are coming up, it's a really good way to just keep track of those things and making sure that your users are getting to your content efficiently. I personally feel that if I don't have any searches going on, that means that users are finding my content. Hopefully Google Analytics agrees with that, because either they're finding the content or they're not visiting the site, but hopefully it's the first one. The other one that I like to use is Jetpack, and Jetpack's actually one of our sponsors today. At 329, we work with Facebook as a client, and they are very happy with the Jetpack. We give it 2 thumbs up for that. It's got a lot of functionality built into it. It's really great for basic sites if clients need pretty basic functionality. I really like their traffic tools and stats. You can see top posts, searches, a lot of live data from day to day, and it's a really good companion to the Google Analytics plugin. It's not needed, but it is a nice option because, again, clients like to see more stats and see how their site is doing. So next I'm going to talk about a little plugin called Advanced Custom Fields. I use Advanced Custom Fields as a way to make sure that clients can easily edit their content. And it takes the default custom fields functionality that WordPress has built in and takes it a step further. But besides that, one of the things that I like to do is create an options page for my client. Because again, we talked earlier about how we're going to be restricting access to certain areas of the site that can get a client into trouble. But here's the thing. When you're creating a WordPress site, you're creating a piece of software that you're handing off to a client. And the natural feeling is, okay, we need somewhere to go. We expect an options or a settings area. So rather than giving them access to settings that can, get them into trouble, we create a custom one just for them so they know that they have a place to go to modify certain information. This is a great way. You have a good opportunity here to let them edit certain things. You can put in their logo, so you can let them edit their logo, contact information, social media. You can create an area for tracking pixels, so if you have a client that tends to use a lot of tracking pixels and needs to be able to modify those from time to time, you can put a little field in there. You can even have an area to put your type kit or your font awesome calls, anything that would go like in the header or in the footer of your site. For example, I have a client that from time to time she joins more and more social media sites, and she has her social media links linked to, I think, the sidebar of almost every page on her site. And instead of having to email me every time she wants to add a new social media icon, I've now worked it into her options section where she can go in and she can choose the social media icon, and this is using the Font Awesome add-on for Advanced Custom Fields. So it pulls icons from Font Awesome. So she can go in there, she can find the social media icon that she's looking for, she can choose what color it shows up as, and then put a link, hit save, and it populates on the front end. And again, it makes it just really easy for the client to edit. The other thing that you can do with Advanced Custom Fields is there's a little underrated feature in there called instructions. So whenever you're creating a group of fields, there's an instructions area, and this is a really good opportunity to educate your user. You can put in the image sizes, you can put in notes, you can tell them where to go, how this is going to show up on the front end of their site. And so what happens when you have a basic visual editor like that, most of the time your clients are creating their content in a word processor, which means they're making design decisions before they get into WordPress. And I think we all know what happens when you copy and paste from a word processor directly into WordPress. It gets pretty messy. So what I like to do is streamline all of that and style the visual editor so it matches the front end of the site as close as possible. That way they're already seeing what their content is going to look like before they even hit that preview button. It's really easy to do. You add a particular line of code in your functions file, and then you create a separate style sheet and start bringing your default ones in there. Bonus, you can even create a built-in style guide using content from WP Fill Me, and it populates all the necessary content that a user would ever put into the content area and lets them see it formatted. And then a couple other things you can do. Use a theme customizer. It kind of works in a similar fashion as like the options page that I talked about, but again, you're using that as a way for a client to easily edit their content. Use things like widgets, the built-in custom fields. And assume a client should be able to edit their site without knowing a lick of code. So here's the thing. You can do all the things that I suggest in this talk, but there's still going to be errors. It's just going to happen, and you have to anticipate them. So the next thing that I like to do in my process is install an activity log monitor plugin of some sorts. I have 3 that I like: Stream, WP Security, Audit Log, or Simple History. And it's great because you can see what a user is doing, you can see when they did it, you can see the IP address, everything. It may seem a little big brother, and yeah, maybe it is, but the thing is, it's all about helping your user and trying to solve problems as quickly as possible. So I use this 2 ways. One, if a client comes to me and says something happened and I'm not sure exactly how they got to this problem, I can log in, see what they were doing beforehand. It's a great paper trail. The other thing I can do is check in on it from time to time, see what my user is doing, and look at their workflow and go, how can I make it better? So it's always about improving that user experience. I recommend activating this plugin after you've trained your client, because hopefully what you're going to be doing when you train your client is, creating posts and pages, doing all kinds of things. You don't want to get the activity log cluttered up with all of that. But then you activate this plugin after you've trained them, and then you can kind of see once they start logging in what they're doing and see how you can make that user experience better for them. So I mentioned training your client. It's really important to train your client before you give them access to their website. If you are not training your client before handing off a WordPress site, you are doing such a disservice to them. Because again, WordPress may be easy for us because we use it on a daily basis, but it's not for our client. So what you want to do, set up at least 1 training. Show them how to log in with the credentials that you've created for them. Don't use your super admin login, because then you'll get into, they're going to see all the things that you see, and then when you give them their more optimized login, they're going to be like, what the heck, where's the access to all the things? This is a really good opportunity to set expectations. Tell them this is some things that you can expect when you're going into WordPress, some troubleshooting tips. Show them what you've done. Show them how you've optimized that admin for them. Show them the dashboard widgets. Show them the documentation. Educate them on best practices. Tell them, don't copy and paste from a word processor. I mean, this is your opportunity to make the success of their site really shine. So I've mentioned documentation. We have the WordPress Codex. That's our documentation. They're accurate. I look at the WordPress Codex, I look at WordPress.com's documentation, and try to anticipate some of the common questions that will come up. Because when you train your client, it's going to be so much to take in. And if this is their first time touching WordPress, they're going to need something to reference back to. So I'll do some of the basics, like I'll create one, how pages work, how posts work, how you should log in, how the media library works. I'll even do a couple on some commonly used plugins. We use Gravity Forms, so I've created one for Gravity Forms. And you can link to them in that custom dashboard widget. Because again, remember, this is all new to them. So I've covered a lot of information today. And I really hope that you will take some of this away and think about implementing it into your sites. I have a checklist, as I mentioned earlier, on my website that goes over everything that I've gone over in this process, as well as the order that I like to do it. So remember, user experience is more than just a pretty website. It is the experience for both the visitor of the site as well as the client managing the site. So create an admin you can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cristina. Now, if you have any questions, would you please stand up and walk to the middle where we have a lonesome microphone ready for you to ask your question into. Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. You mentioned creating documentation, training, cheat sheets, all that good stuff for users. When you start to have a large number of clients, dozens of, maybe 100 websites out there, how do you manage updating that sort of documentation? Because that's a lot to manually go back and one by one with releases and all that stuff to make sure it's up to date and still useful.
I try to keep it to just the basics. Like I said, I do it in a Google Doc, so that way I just share that one link into all the dashboard widgets. So everybody that has a link to the cheat sheet on Pages is all going to have that same link. And then I just kind of revisit it from time to time. So I'm not updating like an individual doc per client. It's a global one.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
If there's any more questions, we still have plenty of time. 15 minutes.
I have a question, but I have to go to the mic.
Hi. So I just wanted to ask you, did you come up with this system yourself? It seems like it's a really good system, and if you did, how long did it take you of kind of troubleshooting and trying other methods before you kind of came up with something like this that works?
This is a process that was, oh gosh, about a year or two in the making, and it took one really difficult client to really get it going. Because it started actually with a client that was going from one system that they had for 10 years to WordPress, and they were very insistent on, like, we need documentation for everything. We want and they wanted a cheat sheet for literally every single item in that admin sidebar. Yeah. And as I was going through that, I thought, this is actually something that I can take and reuse for other clients.
Yeah. That client was your user experience expert.
Absolutely.
So was it really just your own innovation of coming up with the system, or?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
I was always looking at, like, how can I keep this client from bugging me?
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
And basically, I really love your idea about customizing the admin so that it be more friendly for the user. But I had a question about training. You mentioned about using Google Docs. How about using videos to help you through the admin screen?
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely recommend that. In fact, when I was finishing up my final year in college at the Art Institute, we had to take a class where we had to put together a computer-based training. So I actually did a small video tutorial on just running over the basics of WordPress. So kind of taking those cheat sheet links and doing just a very quick run through. And then I started embedding that as a dashboard widget on my other sites.
So you actually embed the videos in the admin screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I uploaded the video to Vimeo, and then I created my custom dashboard widget where I linked to all the cheat sheets and resources, and then I created another widget where I embedded that video.
I like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this talk. I do something similar with a lot of my clients. But one thing that I'm very curious about is, how do you sell this to your clients?
I don't really sell it to them. We just do it. It's all part of the experience.
Okay, so In other words, like, do you, when you put together your proposal, do you include that there's a certain amount of time that you're going to spend putting documentation and training together, or do you just sort of?
It's just all part of the project. I mean, we indicate that there is training, that you do get access to training, but we don't really go into detail of what all that includes. No, it's all about, you know, bringing that value.
One quick question. Do you let the customer know that what they see is very different, and that there's other things that behind the scenes, this is just helping them?
Yes, and we tend to go over that in that very beginning planning phase where I reach out to the client and ask who needs access to the site and what kind of access do they need. Because sometimes we've had clients say, no, I need super admin access.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's those clients do know what they're doing. Yeah.
And then just for the videos and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
I use a plugin called User Manual,
Mm-hmm.
and they update the videos on every different version.
Oh,
for
okay.
review. So you don't have to do all the documentation, it's either written or video, and they do it for you.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So it's like a membership that you don't have to do anything of that.
Oh, great. Thanks for sharing. Awesome.
Just had a quick question about the logging that you do. And I wonder if there's any kind of issues like in our post-GDPR world where you would have to notify the client, or they would have to notify their employees that they're logging data like that. Is that an issue that you've ever encountered in projects?
No, because we're pretty upfront with that. You know, we let them know that, hey, we've got all these methods for troubleshooting, and it's really up to them. And a lot of times they like seeing that stuff as well because they know that, okay, I can see, you know, if anybody on my team is causing problems. So we haven't run into any issues with that yet. And a lot of times clients appreciate that because it's just another method of, you know, helping them troubleshoot.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Let's give it up for Cristina one more time.